To today's version. So this will be going out very shortly. A lot of news stories this week in the streaming wars. So obviously it's no surprise that we're starting with that again. It's kind of the resident number one spot. But looking at the stories this week, the first one here is related around Twitch, as is the second one. So looking at these stories, obviously Twitch has been kind of the dominant player in the world of esports for a long time, and esports and gaming streaming, but they're really coming after the sports world. So they've launched a dedicated sports category on Twitch, and so now when you go to twitch.tv, there's a dedicated sports section. They've launched with four major teams: soccer teams, football teams from Europe, so Real Madrid, Arsenal. So getting that kind of buy-in obviously is great for them. Kind of legitimizes what they're doing, and I guess football teams are attracted because Twitch has an audience that a lot of football and sports teams in general are looking to get access to. So I think what they can do in partnership together kind of remains to be seen. Obviously, I think it's going to go more than just that they've got an official channel on Twitch. I think they'll be doing some interesting kind of tie-ins together, looking to leverage each other kind of moving forward. Obviously, Twitch on the tech and the streaming side, and then obviously with the official teams, obviously the audience and reach and brand equity that they would have. So it's definitely something to watch out for moving forward, seeing if they partner with different sports and different teams around the world. Obviously, I think we covered last week about Amazon launching IVS, which is interactive video services. So it's kind of bringing over a lot of what Twitch offers in terms of streaming, live chat, interactive components that kind of come on top of that. So now it's a dedicated Amazon service that people can kind of build on top of, which is very interesting. And I've taken a quick look, and it's something that I'll probably use in my own startup moving forward, because it definitely takes out a lot of the heavy lifting. So in terms of us being able to scale with our live interactive platform, it takes out a lot of the heavy lifting, and obviously the scaling issues that kind of come working in the sports industry, because you could potentially have thousands or hundreds of thousands of fans tuning into a live stream. So that definitely kind of ticks a lot of the boxes for us. The second story as well is Twitch related. So the NWSL, the Female Sport League, has found some success on Twitch. Kind of mentions here as well about other leagues, the G League, which is the NBA's kind of development league. They've been on Twitch for a long time, but I think we covered a story earlier on in the year about the G League kind of moving away from Twitch. I think it was to Mixer at the time, so obviously that kind of remains to be seen what the update is there. And the Australia's National Basketball League, so obviously great opportunity for Twitch to enter sports. And obviously this kind of first story, they probably learned a lot from doing these kind of initial deals with the different leagues, primarily around basketball, but now the NWSL. So obviously Twitch's kind of main kind of advantage for these leagues is access to that younger audience I was talking about. So definitely be kind of watching Twitch moving forward, because I think they're really going to move after sports en masse. Then the third story, obviously I'm a Spurs fan, as you may know. So they did a Derby studio show, which was great for them. 1.4 million views. They live streamed it on all the different platforms in China, so WeChat, Douyin, Weibo, Mass 1.4, which is probably really good for Spurs. Obviously they wouldn't be the number one sports team in China. We do have an interview that I recorded last week with Andrew Collins from Mailman. So they work with Spurs on their presence in China. They're a Chinese-based sports marketing agency, kind of a global presence now with offices in Singapore and London. But their primary business is for international sports teams coming over to China and looking to be on the ground, for tours and for fan activations in China. And so it's a very interesting interview with him that'll be coming out shortly. The connection kind of dropped out, so yeah, my editing skills will definitely be put to the test to see if I can kind of rectify that, because the connection was kind of poor, but very interesting insights. You might have seen the Mailman Red Card report. I cover that every year, so it's probably only 2 years of the Mailman report being in the digest, but fascinating insights into what different sport or what different teams are up to in China, and there's kind of like a ranking system based on their presence on different social, how their engagements are going, number of fans. So very interesting. Definitely check out Mailman, and as I said, that the interview with Andrew will be coming out shortly. Moving on, so cancelled games could cost Sinclair $130 million. So obviously, every game pretty much in the world was cancelled. Obviously, we kind of covered Sinclair earlier on this year, late last year, when people were picking up the kind of regional sports channels. Sinclair ended up purchasing those from Fox as part of the kind of Fox Disney merger that they had to kind of sell those assets. And Sinclair picked them up. So obviously, having no games for those regional markets could cost them 130 million. So, again, it's another pressure on traditional broadcasters and cable companies in the US. Moving on then, BT Sport Air Champions League final on YouTube. So this happens every year with BT since they've got the rights. Obviously, BT are kind of the challenger, or one of the challengers to Sky's kind of dominance in the UK. So they don't have the same subscriber numbers as Sky, and previously, it was free to air for the Champions League. I think it was ITV had the rights before BT. So I think part of the package was to guarantee that the final would have a lot of eyeballs on it. So again, it's going to be on the Champions League, and BT over the years have done some very interesting things around the Champions League final. They did Google Cardboard kind of publishing to allow for VR kind of experience. I remember there was pictures with Rio Ferdinand and Gary Lineker, holding up the cardboard. So they'll definitely be doing something innovative and imaginative for this final, I'd imagine, and kind of going on, what they've launched for the Premier League, the kind of watch along. I'd imagine there might be something along those kind of lines to help fans, enjoy a game with their friends and family when they can't really be together in the current state of things. And then the final story on the streaming wars is the European Tour and Canal Plus have announced long-term extension. So obviously they've been, kind of tied together for a while, and that extension has gone through. So again, more rights kind of going to traditional broadcasters there. So moving on now to gambling. So Monkey Knife Fight seals fantasy sports partnership with LA Kings, LA Galaxy. So we covered them. I can't 100% remember when we covered Monkey Knife Fight. They had a deal with someone else in the last kind of 6 months or so. So they're kind of partnering with different teams in LA. So obviously kind of challenging the likes of FanDuel and DraftKings in this kind of daily fantasy sports gaming platform business. So obviously, LA is a very attractive market for a lot of sports and fantasy and gambling companies. California, they don't have legal gambling yet, but I guess this is a great way for them, Monkey Knife Fight, and for LA Kings and LA Galaxy to be kind of ready to kind of flip the switch when legal betting and gambling becomes legal in California. Moving on then, New Jersey track enjoys $26 million horse racing betting bonanza on Saturday. So it set a record for the number of bets being handled at the park, despite limited live attendance. So obviously, I think that might have been partly down to, obviously online gambling is now legal in New Jersey. Not too many other sports are kind of running as well to kind of bet on. So obviously, the people who are partial to a bet, have looked to horse racing as a potential outlet. So I think New Jersey are doing pretty well. They were one of the first to kind of enact the betting laws that kind of came as a result of the Department of Justice and kind of removing the anti-betting laws. Very interesting story here from the Hollywood Reporter. So it's kind of a guest column. So basically putting forward the potential of will people start betting on athletes' heart data and different kind of biometric data that comes off a player while they're in competition. So obviously with data becomes a potential betting or prop market. Not sure how it would exactly work. Who's going to have the highest heart rate during the game, or it kind of mentions here about respiration and temperature and blood pressure. Very interesting concept anyway, at least. I don't think it would be major kind of betting markets, but I think having access to that data as a sports fan would be quite interesting. Just to see what the heart rate of a player is while they're active, but also in kind of pressure moments to see does it spike. How does one player compare against another when they're taking a penalty? Is their heart rate relatively stable, or is there a peak in the heart rate that comes with the pressure? So yeah, I think it would be a while before we see that happening, but definitely interesting to kind of watch what people will be betting on in the future. So only a couple of stories this week from esports. So drive-in esports arenas have been developed in 4 US cities. So I think that's an interesting development. So it's obviously esports arena is something that we've covered quite a few times in the last kind of 12 to 18 months. So they've been built, kind of in cities all around the world. Obviously, these ones kind of taking a slant of drive-in esports arenas. Obviously, it could be COVID related, and try to get people in stadiums, get fans interacting at the live event. We've seen people doing drive-in concerts, drive-in movies, drive-in pretty much everything. Try everything else to have that outlet for kind of social interaction, but in that bubble of your own car. So good to see esports kind of doing something innovative there. Don't know if they'll be long term or if it's kind of a way for them to keep their development kind of on progress with these new restrictions. Obviously that we're kind of living under these days. So Venn, again, a company that we've covered a couple of times in the past year, and again very recently. So they've got distribution deals with the likes of Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. So they're producing content for broadcasts that focus on gaming, with stats, behind the scenes footage, esports competitions and the like, essentially kind of packaging up content that could be broadcast. But obviously here the story is that they're partnering with these digital players as a distribution channel for their network of content. And speaking of content, we're going to move on now to content. So another Sportico.com news story. They kind of launched very recently, and I kind of speculated that we will be covering them quite a bit, and I think we've covered them every week since. So Sports goes Hollywood as Deshaun Watson, James Harden signed with Game One. So Game One is a kind of a production studio focusing on sports, and they're kind of working with different sports personalities to provide extra content. Obviously, the story here mentions Danica Patrick, the retired NASCAR racer, and James Harden, one of the biggest names in the NBA right now. So very interesting kind of developments, that there's a lot of content and production companies kind of setting up around sports to create extra content. Obviously with lockdown, with no live games, that content became very, very valuable, but a lot of people are kind of cottoning on to sports is more than just the live action, that it's much more of a lifestyle, that people kind of want to get closer to the celebrities and sports players and sports stars that they follow. So I think Game One is just one of the many studios that are kind of focusing on this type of content now. And then What to Stream, Jayhawkers, thrillingly analytical drama of Will Chamberlain's college years. So he's at the University of Kansas, the Jayhawks, hence the name of the kind of documentary, the Jayhawkers. So again, we've seen a lot of kind of focus, obviously the huge hit that was The Last Dance, focusing on Michael Jordan. So we've seen a number of other kind of deals for similar kind of content. Hopefully that doesn't interrupt there. a number of different content around different kind of sports celebrities and stars. So obviously Chamberlain is from a previous year, so I don't know too much other than that he was very good at his job. So here the story kind of focuses on how he became an unofficial civil rights leader. So I think it very much hits on note of what we're kind of currently kind of experience with the social justice and civil rights kind of issues that we're seeing in America and the protests. Then moving on to marketing and social. So I was actually attended the Sports Pro event during the week that focused on social. So a very interesting piece. There was a member from the FA, the Football Association, kind of manages football in England, especially the national team and the FA Cup. There was a representative from AS Roma who have been very active on social and done very innovative things, like their missing persons kind of campaigns alongside their announcements for new stars. So obviously signing a new player, you get a lot of exposure when you put that out on social, and then kind of coupling that with missing persons kind of notice to help drive attention to it, to try and get a nice resolution from that. And then there was a member from the Spurs team as well, which is great to kind of get insights into their live. I'd say the live China story didn't get covered, but they've been producing their own live kind of pre-match game show, which is very interesting, because I've been kind of speculating that sports teams are going to start doing that, and it looks like COVID was the impetus for a lot of teams doing that. One of the main kind of headlines was, social media content to shift from TV mindset. So I think everyone's been kind of raised with a TV first kind of mentality. But obviously over the last kind of 15 years, social media has crept in. Obviously it's super important, but people are still thinking about TV first. So, that shift is now starting to happen, and, the future is going to be more kind of focused on social media, but also on mobile phone kind of first content. And then kind of following up on a story from a couple of weeks ago, I think, or maybe it was last week, Twitter saying it's looking at subscriptions as a diversified revenue stream as ad revenue drops. And the next story is about revenue from Snap, but they're kind of saying that Q3 they'll probably have a decline. So very interesting to see what Twitter actually come out with in terms of a subscription product. Dorsey was kind of saying that it's got to be something that's complementary to their existing platform. He kind of mentioned about paywalling certain types of content with their partners. So last week we covered Inter Milan doing a deal with Twitter, not paywalled, but this kind of exclusive kind of content deals going out through Twitter. So I've been kind of speculating since that story that that might become the subscription model. Obviously we saw last year or early this year Liverpool doing a deal with YouTube for, I think it was either £1 a month or £199 per month for exclusive access to Liverpool content on YouTube. So it wouldn't surprise me if Twitter are kind of exploring something similar, because obviously sports fans are very, very passionate about their team and they want access to new and exclusive types of content. So that might kind of form basis of what Twitter are going to experiment with over the coming year or so, to see if there is a subscription model that can kind of work for them and their partners. Then moving on to Snap, so its revenue was up 17% in Q2, but ad demand could fall in Q3. So I think any kind of advertising based company is probably a little bit scared right now. Obviously it's kind of part of the reason why Twitter are looking at that subscription type model to diversify away from Twitter. As a free platform, advertising pretty much is the business model that kind of comes out of it. Obviously kind of doing content deals with different companies and distribution deals. But yeah, 18 months ago I thought Snap were gone when Instagram kind of ate their dinner by introducing stories, but they had a kind of a rebound since then. Obviously all the talk over the last kind of 12 months has been all about TikTok, which is obviously very similar in a lot of ways to Snap. So a lot of still big questions at Snap to see how they can kind of weather the storm. And speaking of weathering storms, interesting piece here from Digiday. So, what will happen to the advertising dollars if sports go on another coronavirus-related shutdown? So, obviously, sports across the board are kind of reliant on advertising or sponsorship dollars. Obviously, all the teams kind of more sponsorship deals, but a lot of the media around sports, be it broadcast, radio, print, websites, a lot of it's based around advertising dollars that are going to be spent on the platform. Um, so, I don't think anyone in sports really wants to contemplate this happening, but it's definitely a very real possibility. So I think a move away from advertising models might start happening kind of across the board. Um, so yeah, another story along the similar kind of lines: network ratings and ad dollars plummet in the absence of live sports. And so we've kind of always kind of thought here that live sports is the last bastion of kind of TV, must see TV, where you're kind of tuning in at the same time, and a lot of advertising dollars go behind that because people don't skip ads when it's live because you can't. So there's been kind of huge hits there in the industry. So moving on now to sponsorship. So a few pieces here that are kind of interconnected. So we'll start with the good news first. So UBS secures naming rights for the Islanders home at Belmont Park. So that's the New York Islanders NHL team. So there's been a couple of different prices kind of floating around. So $275 million for the 20-year deal, or $300 million for the 20-year deal. So I think they kind of executed that at the right time. Obviously, the story down below, the changing landscape of sports stadium naming rights deals, kind of calls into question about, that kind of model kind of moving forward. So yeah, good deal for both, I'd imagine. But obviously, kind of went through kind of a rough patch. But obviously, taking a 20-year view on things, you'd hope that everything's kind of back to normal and the deal would be a success. So an interesting piece here then from Forbes. The changing landscape. Some of the biggest deals in sports are around the naming of the stadium, typically kind of long 10, 15, 20-year deals, 10 or 20 million a year in some cases. So I think that is obviously kind of changing as a Spurs fan. Or stadium is still unnamed. Obviously, I think that was a big part of the funding strategy for building a new stadium, is that we'll be able to lock in 300 million or 400 million with a long-term partner to offset the cost of that stadium development. That hasn't happened. I think the Spurs chairman, Daniel Levy, kind of had a price in mind. No one kind of met it, and now obviously COVID has kind of changed a lot for sponsors, and kind of looking to see who they could potentially get now as a stadium sponsor. So I think we kind of covered a similar story to this one here. Shifting consumer spending brings new sports sponsorship opportunities. So it's not quite stadium and name rights related, but when you're kind of looking at who is advertising around sports now, here in Ireland and in the UK, a lot of live sports advertising has been gambling companies, consumer products, but increasingly it's been kind of delivery services. Amazon is now one of the biggest spenders in advertising in the world. So there's kind of a change in the advertising world. Deliveroo and Just Eat, the food delivery kind of services have been kind of heavily advertising around live sports. So do they become the potential new sponsors or naming rights sponsors for teams moving forward? Very, very interesting. And then the Professional Fighters League announces multi-year partnership with Acronis. So they're obviously in kind of cybersecurity, but they're kind of betting on the digital kind of side of their product. Their OTT platform, digital content, social media. So kind of partnering with them makes a lot of sense. Kind of moving on now to the deal section. the sports media startup Wave.tv pulls in new funding as it targets expansion. So they did a $32 million Series A round, which is a lot of money in the current kind of climate. So it's going to be incorporated as Bullpen Sports Network at between 50 and 100 million valuation. So obviously, the kind of live streaming market is alive and well. Moving on now to the next story. Hollywood stars and ex-US women's national team players unite to bring NWSL team to Los Angeles. So you can see the names of the some of the stars here mentioned. Jennifer Garner, Eva Longoria, Natalie Portman are involved in this ownership group. So it's great to see female stars kind of backing female sports. So I think that would be a really big one, and obviously Los Angeles is a huge market for sports teams. So I think it's a very, very interesting play by them. So I think they'll be kind of joining the league in 2022 or 21, 22, yeah. Then, not quite a deal, but the Minnesota Timberwolves looking to explore the sale of the franchise. So the Ring Group may be looking to sell the team that they've owned since 1995. So obviously the value of sports teams has gone up massively since 1995. Might be a kind of a shaky moment, so potentially another big NBA or American sport franchise up for sale. Obviously we kind of talked last week about the New York Mets kind of going through their sale process at the moment. Then moving on to hardware, so looking at Peloton, I think everyone's kind of aware of their service and platform, pairing a kind of a smart bike with kind of digital content. Obviously with a global shutdown, I think Peloton are one of the best placed companies to take advantage of that, because obviously people were looking to stay fit and healthy, but confined to home, that's pretty hard. So their kind of combination of exercise with digital content and feeling part of a community has been very, very important for a lot of people. Last year they went public, so they're doing extremely well. So the kind of story here is kind of talking about the hardware kind of side of the business isn't really what they're looking after. Obviously it's kind of the gateway and kind of the necessity to kind of be part of their ecosystem, but the apps and the add-ons and one-on-one coaching that could potentially fall on top of that is their real kind of cash cow moving forward. So yeah, there's just one and only piece this week on hardware. So moving on now to retail and e-commerce. So again, another Fanatics story. Pretty much every retail and e-commerce story we've done seems to involve Fanatics. So Marshawn Lynch partners with Fanatics so to run his Beast Mode online store. So this is the first kind of deal that Fanatics have done with an individual athlete for their personal brand. Usually they do deals with teams for their merchandise and apparel sales. This is the first one with individual athletes, so that's probably something that they're going to look to explore more, because the power of an athlete is so big right now. Their personal brand is often more heavily followed than the team that they play for, especially on social media. So I think that the power of the athlete is going to increase over time, and this is probably the first of many individual deals that Fanatics are going to do with individual sports stars. Moving on to VR. So again, just one story here. The MLB is set to launch Oculus VR live streams. So obviously, like every other sport, there's going to be no fans or very limited fans allowed to watch the games. So if you have a MLB.tv subscription and an Oculus Rift, that you'll be able to consume that content in a VR platform. I do have a Oculus Dev Kit 2. Not sure if that's going to be supported, but I might see if I can potentially get a subscription to MLB.tv. Not a fan of baseball in any stretch of the imagination, but I think it'd be interesting to see how a big league like that are going to incorporate VR moving forward, to see what they're kind of offering. What is the experience like? Is it just like watching TV but in a in a kind of a 3D world that you can look around, or are they going to start overlaying different content? You know, the dev kit 2 that I have doesn't have any kind of controller paddles, but a lot of the new ones do. So can you use that to kind of interact with different kind of on-screen kind of components? So that kind of remains to be seen. But you know, if I can get that Oculus Rift Dev Kit 2 working with the MLB.tv, I'll definitely check it out and see if I can kind of update you on the experience to see how that goes. So moving on now to some COVID news. Obviously trying to keep it to a minimum. Obviously there's a lot more stories that could be covered here relating to COVID, but I've been trying to kind of keep them minimal. So interesting story here from CNBC talking about how the MLB are going to be relying on a lot of tech companies to, you know, enhance the experience for their fans, but also for the teams and the players. So they kind of mention here about Apple, Google, and Sony and how they're going to be using their tech to help the MLB. So you know the kind of piece here that you know there's going to be iPads in the dugout. So I think they're giving like 15 per team, and that will help them then with the kind of stat analysis of the players during the game. Then Google Cloud, I think they've signed up with 30 MLB teams to kind of host their kind of live stats data. So obviously, you know, a lot of that Google Cloud data will be, you know, kind of fed into the iPad. So, you know, the coaches and the staff will have access to, you know, how players are performing, what are their kind of vital signs, are they close to fatigue or anything like that. So very interesting to see how tech is really kind of stepping into the sports world. And then another story here related to COVID. So, you know, we've seen in the Premier League and La Liga kind of pumping virtual cheers and chants over broadcast. So, you know, in a soccer environment, you know, kind of taking the sounds and the songs from the FIFA EA Sports game and kind of overlaying that on top of the broadcast. But here is a story about Yamaha testing an app that would let sports fans pipe virtual cheers into empty stadiums. So it's, you know, kind of a remote kind of based cheering. So if I'm watching from home, I can somehow, you know, vocalize my support or dissatisfaction with the team to kind of pump that into the stadium. So it's an interesting one. So, you know, through the press of a button, and it gets amplified into the stadiums. So it's kind of like a live engagement kind of product with an audio output. So, you know, I'm not sure exactly how it's going to work, but you know, if you've a blue button and a red button, you know, if more people are pressing the red button, does that mean the red chants are going to outweigh the blue? So that's what kind of gets represented inside the stadium. It's going to be interesting because I think a lot of companies are working on different kind of audio options for sports, which, you know, you wouldn't really kind of think about pre-COVID, but it's definitely an interesting kind of side of the business and side of the experience, because I'm a big fan of the artificial sounds, even though I know they're fake, but it definitely makes it a more enjoyable experience rather than just empty sound. And then moving on, obviously we covered a few stories last week on the Washington Redskins, but now they've changed their name to Washington Football Team while they kind of wait for that rebranding to take place. This is kind of a story of you know, fans being polled on the potential options that have been kind of mentioned, and people aren't really a fan of them. Obviously, it will take a long time for a sports team to kind of go through a rebranding. Obviously, you know, I think it was 1932 is when the Washington Redskins were established. So it's obviously a long history to kind of rewrite and get a new brand that people are kind of associated with and fans of. Then moving on to the last story of the day, very interesting story. Just going to edit that. I'm not sure where that came from. So Lebron James rookie card goes for a record 1.8 million at auction. So it's absolutely mind-boggling amounts of money for a piece of cardboard. But obviously, you know, the kind of rookie cards in particular are quite valuable, especially for a star like LeBron James. Kind of more of an American sports kind of phenomenon of kind of trading cards based around sports teams. But yeah, 1.8 million spent for a LeBron James rookie card. So I'd imagine there'll probably be a lot of people out there going through old collections to see if they do have a LeBron James rookie card, because it's a mind-boggling amount of money. It's like winning the lottery, having one of those. So bit of a strange story to end with, but we've seen kind of the digitization of trading cards. A lot of crypto kind of players involved in the space. So will it be possible to see an auction for a similar digital crypto based trading card in the future for this amount of money? I think there's something very special about the physical kind of aspect, but if people have a close attachment with the digital ones like they do the kind of physical ones, there's nothing to stop a similar kind of auction in the future. So that's it for this week. Thank you for tuning, and have a great sporting weekend.